This is the Rebound Rundown. I'm your host, Paul Fritschner. Your home for college basketball in the Cincinnati area and across the country every Monday through Friday during the season. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome into another episode of the Rebound Rundown. I'm your host, Paul Fritschner. This is a daily show during the season that covers all of the college basketball teams, both here in the Cincinnati area and around the country. And I'm joined today by Ben Eckstein. Ben, great to have you here. How we doing?
Great to be here. I'm great.
Let's go. We're back for another overtime episode of the Rebound Rundown. That means that a Rebound Rundown overtime. That's with Ben, and this is our last episode with Ben. He's going to be gone for the summer, come back in August. We'll get right back to it with the overtime shows, but do want to make sure that I say right here at the top, wherever you're watching this right now, if you're watching it on TV, go down, make sure that you listen to this one as well, and subscribe wherever you're listening to it, Apple, Spotify. You can subscribe on YouTube to the Rebound Rundown, and make sure you follow us on social media at Rebound Rundown. If you ordered some merch, that merch will be available soon. It's with embroidery right now, so that's coming right around the corner. And then the last update, did we have anything else? Any other housekeeping, Ben? Anything else?
I want to say that's it.
Okay, good. Usually the housekeeping takes us a minute, but no, I think we're right into it here to start the show. So here's what we're going to do on today's show. We're going to run through all of the local teams again, kind of give you an idea now that the portal has calmed down, give you an idea of where these teams are right now. There have been some additions to these teams since the last time we talked to you, and we'll give you some updates where we can and go from there. So we'll start with Xavier, and then we'll get into Cincinnati, Louisville, Kentucky. There's a lot going on down in the Bluegrass State there. But with Xavier, a couple of things. They added one player since the last time we talked. There's also been some scheduling updates. Cleveland State was added to the schedule as a bye game. That'll be at Xavier. Iowa, the date for that game was set November 20th. The MTE, it was reported earlier this week that they were going to Atlantis to play in the Battle for Atlantis. That's incorrect, at least as of when we're recording this. Now, by the time you all are watching or listening to this, it might be public where Xavier's going. I don't know how quickly that timeline is going to unfold for Xavier. There's been a lot of moving parts. It sounds like Xavier's working with a couple of other teams that they're trying to find a tournament, find a destination that suits them. Initially, it was Atlantis. It sounded like a while ago I had heard Xavier was going down there. I don't know what fell through on that side, but something must have fallen through that Atlantis, at least for now. It's all TBD. There's a ton of moving parts. It does sound like, from what I've heard, Xavier's still aiming to play in either Florida or the Caribbean would be my guess, one of those two spots. And it'll be a two-game MTE, so a 4-team MTE, and that's where they're trending right now because of scheduling and everything else. You add the game to the schedule, and even still all these teams wanting to play in a 4-game MTE. It just makes more sense, I think, with the importance of how the schedules break down and everything else. You play in these 4-game MTEs. Where that'll be for Xavier, where that'll be for Cincinnati, we don't know yet, or at least not as we record this. But Ben, getting into the roster, Xavier's roster is done. They added Braden Applehans, which is their last piece to the roster. Applehans played for Richard Pitino at New Mexico for 3 years, then played at Drake. Really an end-of-the-bench depth guy, but somebody that at least has experience in the system, which, as we talked about with Rick Broering on last week's episode, is always important. You just find guys that are familiar with the system. You've seen Drake. You watched Drake. He got some run at Drake this past season. Any thoughts on Applehans?
Yeah, so 6'6", 190, career 40% three-point shooter. He's got a smooth left-handed jump shot. He kind of fell out of the rotation a little bit as Valley play got going. But what I really like about his game is his ability to catch and shoot. He can create his own, but he's really mostly an outside player. And while he's most likely going to be on the end of the bench, a guy who can shoot that well as a practice player, someone with some familiarity, he's going to be able to play a role some way or another.
Yeah. All right, let's get into the roster in general, because I think we've done a lot with Xavier over the last few weeks and breaking all this down, and we'll do the same thing here with Cincinnati in a minute. Although Cincinnati's is not quite as finished as Xavier's is, they're still looking for a couple of pieces. Let's grade the Xavier roster. Let's really take a retrospective here now that Xavier's roster is done and grade the roster, grade the job that we think this coaching staff did in assembling what this Xavier team is going to be next season. Go ahead.
In terms of like a letter grade?
Yeah, well, just in general. You can approach it from, what they were looking at going into the offseason. You can approach it with the actual pieces that they put together. Anything you want, however you want to attack this.
I'll say this could be a homer answer, but I feel like it's got to be an A. We look at it from the perspective that every major target they went after, they landed. They had a plan going in. They obviously succeeded on that plan looking at the guys that they got. You're able to get these power conference guys who were proven. You're able to get mid-major guys who fit a certain kind of style and thing that they do well. It felt to me that Xavier's roster was pretty close to done a few weeks ago, and then they went and added guys like Applehans, like Ida Kudis. So to me, it felt like it was almost extra in a sense. But I don't think you could have asked for Richard Pitino to do a better job. Looking at the roster from year 1 to year 2, the gap in talent is seismic. And we're going from bottom half of the Big East type expectations to top 5 in an NCAA tournament appearance, hopefully in year 2.
Yeah, I would think an NCAA tournament appearance has to happen for this Xavier team. You've heard me. If I've said it once, I've said it a million times. Look, they spent the money, they got the resources, the donations, everything that needed to happen to put this team in the NCAA tournament. It needs to happen next season. I expect that it will happen next year. I think this is an NCAA tournament team. We've talked, and I think Rick and I talked about this, and it's one of those things that you maybe make the same point over and over, and I sometimes forget which show I say what on, but one of the things that we've talked a little bit about with Xavier going into next season, if you're just looking at some concerns, right? Because I think we've talked a lot about what this team can do well or what they expect to do well. They're complementary pieces on this roster. They have scoring at different places on the floor at different levels. If there's one concern to me, maybe it's that you don't have the top end guy, the guy that was very clearly always the go-to piece on their team that could 100% translate to the Big East level as the go-to guy. Now, there are multiple SEC starters on this team. I'm not saying that they don't have very, very talented players at all, and I'm nitpicking here. But if you are just looking for maybe something, that would probably be the one thing I would say.
Yeah, I feel like that definitely is a question mark just because you can't look at the roster and be like, this is the guy. But I don't necessarily think that that is a massive issue just because True Washington in a lower usage role at Miami, especially with a guy like Trey Donaldson being more on the ball, True showed that like end of shot clock, these shot creation type of plays, he can be the guy. Same with Chance Westry. He pretty much orchestrated that entire UAB offense. Granted, going from UAB to Xavier is going to be an adjustment, but he also showed that he can be a shot creator and a guy who at late in the shot clock can be the guy. I think, like you said with the SEC starters, I think Nwoko could be that guy, just depending on what this offense is going to look like, if it's going to center around him being the guy late. And Ruben Dominguez is just going to be your three-point guy if you find some way to get a drive and kick late. But I would imagine True Washington or Chance Westry to be guys who could kind of be that go-to in their own right.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that that's what you're looking at now is something fun to monitor over the summer as the workouts get going and maybe some reports start to leak of, oh, this player's looking good or this player needs to improve or whatever we talk about from the summer discourse. That's always, we get into June, we get into July, and you start to see the guys on campus and you hope that everybody's healthy. Gabe Pizzato coming back from a torn meniscus. You hope that he gets healthy. All of these components to this team that will come together. I think, to your point, I think it's going to have to be one of Westry or True Washington. You're not going to Mike Nwoko late in the shot clock unless you drop a pass down into the post for him off a very set design play, or something goes incredibly wrong and you just say, hey, just try and use your length a little bit to get over something.
It's like Westry's just like, Mike's down there somewhere. Just throw it up, see if he can finish a lob.
Yeah, you're right. That's the thinking there for me. Anything else, this is, like I said, maybe you come back in town to Cincinnati here at some point, Ben, but going away for the summer, is there anything that you're looking at or want to keep an eye on, or predictions you have, or anything on the Xavier front before we move on?
I think with Xavier, the whole kind of go-to guy, we're really nitpicking to find some sort of weakness. I've said it so many times on this show. This roster just fits so well in terms of how good it is complementary-wise. But the thing that I think I'm the most interested in is how they look defensively. We obviously know that True Washington is one of the best perimeter defenders, probably not only in the Big East, but in the entire country. Chance Westry with his positional size at 6'6". Ruben Dominguez was an above-average defender. So on the perimeter, there's less questions defensively. But my big question, and like we've said on this show multiple times, how guys like Jovan Milicevic and Mike Nwoko are going to be as interior defenders. Jovan struggled with foul trouble, obviously. Playing the 5 definitely put him at a disadvantage there. And Nwoko, he showed he can be a shot blocker, but in terms of kind of wall-to-wall, body-to-body, going bump for bump in the interior, there definitely are some question marks. So I'm hoping to hear some things throughout the summer that show, granted, maybe it's not necessarily going to be against the big kind of dominant bigs that they're going to see, but just some sort of improvement or kind of areas for, okay, there can be some improvement within the interior defense of this team.
All right, let's move on to Cincinnati. Akai Fleming is the commitment that we've seen since the last time you and I recorded an overtime episode of the Rebound Rundown. Run us through Fleming.
So I really like Fleming. He's from Atlanta, decided to go to Georgia Tech, played his high school ball in the Overtime Elite program. He's 6'4", 184. I think he has major upside. Being a guy who was a double-figure scorer, the percentages aren't going to jump off the page, and it felt like he was pretty inconsistent at times. But the big thing with him is I feel like he showed flashes of what he can be at a power school like Georgia Tech. He can score at all 3 levels, show that he can be a shot creator in a Georgia Tech offense that kind of felt chaotic and disorganized at times. The big thing, too, is he also possesses really, really good vision. He's a great passer, great feel for the game. As a freshman, you absolutely love that. He also showed that he can be a solid defender for his size at 6'4". He could probably gain a little bit of weight, which I would imagine he's definitely going to put on in this offseason. But this is a guy with really high upside, being a double-figure scorer in the ACC, a guy has done it against competition, who you can plug and play and expect him to be able to get maybe 8 to 10 points a night in the Big 12.
So the other day we were listening, Jared Calhoun was talking about what this roster still needs to do, and you'd probably expect them, and again, we're recording this on May 14th, so by the time this comes out next week, it may, who knows what has or has not changed. But as of right now, you're looking to get to, I think he said 13 guys, and they're at 11 right now. So you need a couple of more additions to this team. Probably looking at something down around the basket, something in the interior. What would you add if you're Cincinnati?
So I think, like you said, the interior, you have Hastings, you have Allensbach. I think with Tyler Tejada and Adlin El-Amin, they're going to be listed kind of at the 3 to 4 range, but I feel like their games are more played on the outside. I think if you're going to do anything, exactly. If you're going to do anything, I feel like if you want to go get a 4 with more of an interior presence, maybe not necessarily a guy who's going to be a scorer, but a guy who can rebound and defend down there at a higher level, just because El-Amin, he's long and lengthy, and Tejada, to me, he has more kind of guard-like skills. But if you go get kind of a more true 4 in the sense to complement a guy like Hastings and Allensbach, who are both going to play the 5, I think that would suit Cincinnati really well in terms of a last addition for scholarship players.
They're deep on the perimeter. I really like what Cincinnati has been able to put together on the perimeter. I think they're going to score the ball very well. It's funny when we talk about Xavier and we talk about Cincinnati and what this crosstown shootout could look like this year, and what some crosstown shootouts have looked like in years past, where it's a rivalry game, it's grinded out, it's a gritty defensive battle. I mean, this could be a crosstown shootout where the point total going into the game is in the upper 150s, 160s with the way these two offenses are trending.
That's like Jared Calhoun said it in his introductory press conference. He wants to play a style of basketball that puts fans in the seats. In football, you want to watch teams score touchdowns. In basketball, you want to watch teams put it in the basket. We obviously know how Richard Pitino teams play with this fast-paced style. Both teams are going to clash offensively, and as a fan base of Cincinnati or Xavier, you got to be here for it in that regard.
Looking at the transfer portal rankings, so 24/7 Sports put out their class rankings, their final rankings for the 2026 transfer portal. Now, obviously, some of these schools are still going to add players, so the class rankings themselves may shift as we get through the next 3 or 4 weeks and more of these players commit. Some of the players come back from the NBA draft, those kinds of things, and it all fills itself out. But at least as we sit here right now, they're not going to update player rankings anymore, which means that we have a pretty good idea of where these teams sit. The next team we're going to talk about is Louisville, and right now they sit at number 1 on the transfer portal rankings. They're ahead of Tennessee at number 2, Texas at number 3, Indiana at number 4, Miami of Florida at number 5, Duke 6, North Carolina 7, Providence at 8, Texas A&M 9, and then to round out the top 10, it's Michigan. That's your top 10 in the transfer portal this season. I want to run through the Big East and the Big 12 here, since we've already talked about Xavier and Cincinnati. In the Big 12, Houston right now has put together the best portal class in the conference. West Virginia behind them at number 2, Cincinnati at number 3, Kansas at number 4, Baylor at number 5. Baylor coming off a terrible year this past season, so trying to get back to more of their standard there. In the Big East, Providence at number 1, UConn at number 2, and Xavier sitting right now at number 3. Providence pretty clearly at number 1 in the Big East. They've created some separation there between themselves and number 2, UConn. UConn and Xavier almost identical on the rankings. Now, UConn with some big-time retention. They bring back a guy like Braylon Mullen, Silas Demery, a lot of retention there for the Huskies. Villanova has had a pretty highly rated, nationally discussed portal season. Their offseason has been great for the Wildcats. Georgetown sitting at number 5. You'd like to see the Hoyas try to get back here to national relevance, but we'll see if that happens this season. But Xavier sitting there at number 3. But overall, we're going to talk about the Louisville Cardinals right now. They are sitting at number 1 in the ACC. They're sitting at number 1 in the country. They have had a spectacular offseason, and it might not be done yet, because there was a report the other day that Milan Momcilovic, if he does come back to school, if he doesn't go to the NBA, that he's considering Louisville. I would love to know how much Louisville is spending on this roster, because since the last time we recorded, they have added a couple of recruits. One, a native of China, Buyong Zhang, some FIBA experience there, top 60 in the 24/7 composite rankings, and then Isaac Ellis as well, an overtime elite MVP reclassified from 2027. He's coming down to the class of 2026. That's the second player for Louisville who is reclassifying from 27 to 26. Everybody wants to be a part of this Louisville roster. Ben, tell me why.
So I think with Zhang, really smooth left-handed jump shot. The thing that I think stuck out to me the most when watching his film is he was fearless. It felt like any time that he had a chance to go downhill, he would, whether there was contact or not, whether there were bigger defenders or not. He's only 6'8", 205, more of a traditional wing, but he would go in there and create contact and finish against bigs. That FIBA experience also is something that I think is going to play an advantage for him. When it comes to Isaac Ellis, I feel like anybody who pays attention to kind of overtime and like Twitter and YouTube basketball is going to have heard of Isaac Ellis. And him and his brother Eli, who's now going to be playing at Charleston, they kind of ran this overtime elite league, if you will, and there was a lot of kind of discourse around that. But the fact of the matter is Ellis can fill it up. He also really smooth left-handed jump shot. Guy, I think he averaged around 30 a game in overtime elite, which 30 a game is 30 a game wherever you're at. Little undersized, 6'1", 165, but that's not something that a college weight room can't fix. But he, at the end of the day, he has such a smooth stroke. He is a great shooter. I don't necessarily see a role for him right away. He may end up redshirting this year, but I could absolutely see him bulking up and keeping the jump shot the way that it is, him having some sort of role in the future for the Cards.
We'll stay in the Bluegrass State, and now we'll get to Kentucky. And Kentucky's in a world of hurt, and they might be in more of a world of hurt about 2 weeks from now. Malachi Moreno has a decision to make, and that decision is, do I want to come back to Kentucky or do I want to play in the NBA next season? I'm sure Kentucky has the money to incentivize him to come back to Kentucky. The Wildcats are also looking at Milan Momcilovic as well. Momcilovic also considering St. John's. I mean, there's a hefty list, and we saw St. John's miss out on Masamba Diop, so there's some extra money there of money that they didn't spend on the interior on Diop. He ended up going to Gonzaga, so things still developing for St. John's, who has not had the most stellar portal class either. But Kentucky, it's really hard to understate how much they have missed. It's the biggest narrative in college basketball right now. We don't need to drone on about everything that you've already heard, but it really, the thing that we're talking about now, trying to figure out, is Moreno going to come back to school? Because if he doesn't, Ben, that is a huge blow to what this team could be next year, and what I'm assuming is what Mark Pope built this team around.
So Mark Pope, for those of you who didn't know, he's been doing these kind of Twitter, Instagram Q&As just after Matt Jones was saying something like, we got to hear something.
Have you liked these Q&As?
I'm a fan. Yeah. Like, it feels like he's kind of pulling back the curtain a little bit, and people are nitpicking things. Like when he said assistant coaches are the ones dealing with agents and stuff like that, people are nitpicking. But I like having this kind of inside look at what they're doing, what they think, why they got the guys that they got, different things like that. But in doing this, in one of them, he said that priority number one was to bring back Malachi. If you told me when Malachi Moreno declared for the draft that there was going to be a chance that he would stay in it and be a first-round pick, I simply wouldn't have believed you. The way that he's shooting up the draft boards right now, after what I would consider a relatively subpar freshman season, he had his moments, he had his flashes.
Pedestrian, you can call it like it is.
But he didn't do anything to necessarily wow me to be like, yes, he is going to be a first-round pick. And like we've said with some of these other guys, their draft stocks are going up without doing really anything because of all the guys who are coming back to school. I figured Malachi would be one of those guys. If he's going to be a first-round pick, he might as well go. But the commitment of Frank Kepnang raises a bigger question to me. When they bring him in, this is going to be his 7th year of college basketball after injury history at both Oregon and Washington. Really good shot blocker and rebounder. He was in the top 5 in the Big Ten when it came to offensive rebounding, top 15 in defensive rebounding, and top 3 in block rate. So a guy who is a traditional big, he's athletic for his size, doesn't get sped up, a decent post game. But I look at him nothing more than a depth piece, a guy off the bench who can provide good minutes. He started at Washington, but Washington was pretty horrible, right? But to me, it felt like he would be brought in as a depth piece, not as a starter. But if you lose Malachi Moreno, you're going to put him into the starting lineup with the questionable injury history. With all the losses they've had with point guards, could you imagine they lose Malachi Moreno? Kepnang gets hurt in the summer, and then what do? At the end of the day, Mark Pope needs to do what he's been doing and probably double it to get Malachi Moreno back, with him now being a projected late first-round pick.
Yeah, I say Malachi Moreno has a pedestrian season. I think he had a pedestrian season in terms of being a first round, an upper tier first round pick in the NBA draft. We'll see where he ends up going. But I mean, one thing you're looking at, and again, for the 100th time, we're recording this at a time where the combine is going on actively, and we're looking at, these 5-on-5 games that they're playing, and he elects not to play in those, which, if you don't really follow the NBA draft process or the combine at all, electing not to play in that does give you more concern as a Kentucky fan to say, if there are doubts. You look at Peter Suter is playing in that event for the grad of Miami, their best player this season, and Peter Suter looking to get a look in the NBA. He's playing in that at the combine. A lot of big names are, but there are names that aren't. And if you feel like maybe you don't want to hurt your stock, you don't want to hurt yourself, whatever it might be, maybe you don't play in it, and he's not.
What you hear from people who really follow the draft closely like this, if you're electing not to play, especially when you're kind of a mid to late first round guy, more often than not, you have a promise from a team that they're going to take you with their pick kind of thing, to where there's no sense in you playing because you are where you want to be. Does Malachi Moreno have a first-round promise? I don't know, but the fact that he should be an area of concern for Kentucky fans.
Agreed. All right, let's keep it moving. We're going to go down we're going to talk about Miami a little bit here. So this broke just before we started recording. There was an article that Matt Norlander wrote for CBSSports.com, and Norlander was talking about the schedule that High Point has put together. Flynn Clayman, High Point, they beat Wisconsin in the NCAA tournament this year, and Flynn Clayman went on the air right after the game in his post-game interview, and Flynn was talking about how difficult it was to get games, right? And he's talking about wanting to play these high major teams. Nobody will play us, and it's the same thing that Travis Steele had talked about with the Red Hawks this season. Nobody will play us. Well, the two teams nobody will play, they're playing each other. It sounds like Miami and High Point are going to play in a neutral site game, TBD on where that site will be. We'll probably hear about that in the next few weeks or so, but awesome for High Point to be able to put that schedule together. They're playing, I believe, Washington State, St. Louis, George Mason, LSU, Miami. High Point has put together a gauntlet of a mid-major schedule. Kudos to them for being able to do that. Miami, it sounds like from what I've heard around Miami, they've had some trouble getting games similar to what happened last year. They've had some trouble being able to put together a schedule like they would like to see. But again, still a lot TBD on the scheduling front. Teams are still just now getting settled out of the portal. Miami's roster is done. NKU's roster is still pretty close to done. Wright State is finishing up. A lot of these teams, Kentucky right now has the most question marks of any team that we cover here on the Rebound Rundown specifically. But that's what I wanted to hit on with Miami. Anything else that you wanted to touch on with Miami?
I'd say not even just with Miami, but the whole of mid-major basketball right now. Look at a lot of these games that are being set up. We have VCU and Santa Clara, St. Louis going and playing a team like High Point. Yeah. I don't know why I had a brain fart there, but just seeing these mid-major teams schedule each other and look at it to where if these high major teams aren't going to play us, we as kind of these high-level mid-majors have to band together, and that'll just create great basketball at the mid-major landscape in non-conference play as well.
Wright State. Let's go to the Raiders. Nikola Joppa, their next commitment, 6'11", 235. Again, finishing out this roster in addition here.
Pretty small role at Colorado State for Joppa, but he showed flashes in the minutes that he did play. He obviously, with the 6'11", 235 frame, his size is kind of his mainstay on both ends of the floor. He's a fantastic screener and a great roller, and that's how he creates a lot of his offensive opportunities. When I was watching the tape, the thing that stuck out to me the most, he is an exceptional passer for his size. It felt like every time he would get the ball on a handoff or at the high post, it felt like Colorado State always had someone who was immediately cutting, and he was able to make a bounce pass or an overhead pass for an easy layup. And that, as an elite passing big man, is something in your skill set that I think separates a lot of bigs, especially at the size that Joppa possesses.
And then NKU, I don't think you and I have talked since NKU has kind of really started to wrap up the roster here. I would expect NKU to have at least one more addition. There's one more addition that I think that we still haven't heard about that they're working on trying to finalize. So hopefully that turns out well for the Norse. We'll see here upcoming soon, but pretty close to done for the roster for NKU. You're looking at NKU, the Norse there with Wright State and Robert Morris. As you heard last week with Rick Broering, we talked a lot about what the Horizon League is going to look like next year. Those three teams expected to be toward the top of the Horizon League. I would expect them in any order to finish 1, 2, and 3 in the league. You could have a surprise. Who knows? Green Bay, anybody like that, that could jump toward the top of the league. But I like what those three teams have done in a real big way. And NKU, I think they've had a very, very impressive portal class.
Yeah, I think they added guys, especially at the guard position, looking at BJ Davis-Ray and Eric Acker, who have experience at the ACC as well as the A10 level. That is so valuable coming down to the Horizon League, showing capabilities at these high levels. Their usage is going to go up, and with that usage increase, they're definitely going to be able to increase their production, be some of the best guards in the league. Looking at what they've done in the front court, Will Short and Noah Pagano, both relatively the same size. Short, more of an inside game. Pagano provides an outside game. I like how they're going to be able to complement each other, as well as bringing back your point guard in Ethan Elliott, bringing back some other guys who are hopefully kind of poised for bigger roles. The NKU roster is shaping up nicely, and especially if Davis-Ray and Acker can play up to the bill, this top three kind of preseason expectation is real for the Norse.
Let's go through some national storylines now for the Norse. We just talked about the Norse. Let's go through some national storylines just in general, things that we're looking at, some things that have come out here in the last few days of some scheduling. I think we've seen some pretty high-level schedules starting to form. You look at, like obviously UConn. There's some neutral site games in there. And what you have to remember when you see these neutral sites, there's two things. One is that it helps you out in the net, because a neutral site, it's easier to play a higher quadrant game out of the net. The other thing, too, is the NIL component. I would love to see more and more home-and-home series. I think the sport would do better with more home-and-home series between high-level teams. But at the end of the day, I understand why the coaches are doing this on neutral sites. Some of the ones that are in neutral sites in the middle of nowhere that I don't understand, where you're really far away from both schools, maybe not. But for a lot of these, you see UConn play in Boston. That's a home. It's not on campus.
UConn should always have a game in the Garden and in Boston.
Yeah,
that's
in both gardens.
Well, TD and MSG.
Yeah, they should just own the Northeast Gardens. That's what they should do. Yeah, and they do try to do that. We saw them play BYU there last year.
They're playing Michigan in Boston this year.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And credit to that was leading into this segment. That's what I wanted to talk about. The schedule that Michigan has put together, I love that. I love, obviously, Nate Oates at Alabama has always tried to put together a great schedule. But being incentivized to win at a high level and challenge yourself in the non-conference, it's awesome.
Well, UConn is playing 3 of the other 4 Final Four teams in their non-conference schedule. That's ridiculous to me. And I think they're also, I want to say they're playing Virginia as well.
I believe so, yeah.
And Ohio State, I believe, too. Then they have Arizona. This non-conference schedule is ridiculous. And I respect Dan Hurley for doing it. I remember a few years ago when they went to Maui and went 0-3. It was a never again kind of thing. But what do? They end up making a more difficult schedule. And I didn't think that they could surpass the difficulty of last year's schedule. What do? They make an even more difficult one. And that's great for the sport, especially with college basketball kind of in the November, December timeline. You're competing with the NFL. You're competing with college football. Having these marquee non-conference games between teams with big brands is only going to help the sport. And UConn is at the forefront of that right now with this schedule.
And the other thing with scheduling that we haven't talked about yet is the Players Era Festival, which is out in Las Vegas. It's going to be a 2-week event. There's an 8-team bracket and then a 16-team bracket, 24 teams in the Players Era this upcoming season. The 16-team bracket, stronger than the 8-team bracket. But the one note, I believe this was a Norlander report as well, is that the 16-team bracket, because they did up the schedule to 32 games this season, that if you make the championship game, and shout out to the Players Era for figuring out that you have to have a bracket. I mean, what we were doing last year was ridiculous. The optics of it weren't great with, the stands weren't full. People were hating on the fact that it was taking away the character and the charisma of the sport of college basketball, which I do agree with in the sense that, yeah, you're putting all these big teams and brands together for a week, and it's awesome to watch as a fan on your couch that you're watching these teams play each other. But the fun of Feast Week is that you're in a random ballroom in the middle of West Virginia in the Greenbrier, or you're at a tiny little gym in Lahaina out in Hawaii, or you're in a ballroom in the Bahamas, or whatever it is. That's the character of the sport. You play a game on an aircraft carrier, like these random things that make this sport so fun to watch. You sanitize it by putting the biggest brands in a massive arena with a few hundred people. Doesn't feel as special. Totally understand that, and I completely agree with it. One of the ways you help the PR of that is by putting a bracket together, because not only are you turning fans off to the visual of it, you're turning fans off to how you're able to even follow it in the first place. Now you can follow it on a bracket. All the games are going to be televised on ESPN. Last year, I believe it was a TNT partnership. Now the Players Era is moving to ESPN. I think ESPN, I was reading something the other day, is starting to maybe invest a little bit more in college. They have a massive package of college basketball games, but trying to do more now, even more so than college basketball. ESPN was always the premier partner, and now we've seen Peacock, TNT, some of these other channels start to pick up inventory. Fox, of course, has had it for a while now, especially since the Big East. But to get back to the Players Era, looks like it's going to be a bracket this year with another very strong field, and that at least makes it more palatable, I think.
You get 2 games. It doesn't matter who you're playing. We look at your point differential, and then we'll figure out the rest. That whole thing kind of bothered me, especially with your consolation games. You didn't know who was going to be playing who, and they played them the day after the 3rd and 4th and then the championship game. That just never made any sense to me in watching it. But yeah, having a bracket, having your guaranteed games, knowing kind of what the different paths for these teams are going to look like, just makes it a better product. It's going to make it easier to follow along. It's going to make it easier to watch. I think the Players Era is doing a fantastic job just bringing this kind of March-like kind of field in a sense in the month of November. And I think after hearing all the backlash that they received about the whole no bracket, just the point differential, all that, it's nice to see that they are kind of looking at what people's feedback and opinions are and then making positive changes.
And the other thing that I thought was interesting, this is getting back to what I was going to say before from Norlander, was that it sounds like if you play in the 16-team bracket and you make the championship game, that because that's the extra game in your schedule, that if you play in the championship game, those teams are going to those 2 teams that play in the title game of the 16-team bracket are going to have to buy out one of their bye games. So they're going to have to cancel one of their bye games, and the Players Era Festival is going to pay for whatever the fee is. So a lot of times you'll see it might be a $95,000 fee that you pay your team, the other team, to come and play at your arena. That's what a bye game is. That they'll buy it out. It's a little nugget. Last thing here, last segment of the show, what we're going to do is debate the 8 portal classes of the teams that we cover here on the Rebound Rundown. We're going to run through all of them. We have mostly the same list Ben and I put together, mostly the same list. We disagree a little bit in the middle portion, but we're going to rank the portal classes and really the overall off seasons, now that the portal is mostly done. We're basically ranking the overall off seasons of these local teams. We'll start at the top. You and I both had Louisville at number 1.
Yeah, so forewarning, when I made this list, I looked heavily on departures and retention and high school recruiting along with the transfer portal classes. The transfer portal classes obviously are kind of doing the heavy lifting when it comes to these offseason acquisitions, but I felt as though looking at it just from the transfer portal wouldn't be doing it all justice. So I think looking at it big picture made it easier to make this list. Like you said, Louisville first. They lost 10 of their 11 main rotational pieces from a year ago. You lose guys like Michael Brown Jr., Ryan Conwell, Isaac McNeely. What does Pat Kelsey go and do? He reloads. Like we said with that number 1 portal class, Jackson Chelstad, Flory Badunga, Carter Knox, Alvaro Fulgaris, Deshane Montgomery, Gabe Dines, stars. Guys who were able to put up numbers at some of the highest kind of conferences, kind of like hardest places to go succeed, at Oregon, at Arkansas, at Kansas, stuff like that. But at the end of the day, they also had a top 20 recruiting class led by, he ended up having a slip because when we talked about it, he was Louisville's all-time number 1 recruit. He's now number 3, but Obina Okeze Jr. And they also bring back a G League guard in London Johnson who didn't play at all. It'd be interesting to see how he looks, as well as Adrian Woolley, who started a little under half of their games, was their 6th man, averaged about 9 points a game. I'm very intrigued to see how he ends up playing this year with a more elevated role. But looking at this team, bare minimum, second weekend. Simple as that. Simple as that.
They have assembled a roster at Louisville that every single Louisville fan watching this is going to expect to compete for a national title. They have to, and they're good enough to. This team is very much good enough to win a national title. We'll see by November if Louisville is our pick to win the national title. I don't know about that. You know, as we sit here in May, I'm not going to make any sweeping judgments like that. You don't want anybody to get hurt, obviously, knock on wood, but there's a lot that has to happen between now and November. The crazy thing is, we've already talked about it on the show, Ben, they could still get better. They could still bring in Milan Momcilovic if he decides to come back to school and if he chooses the Cardinals. It's almost like limitless money.
Regardless of if that happens or not, we need to get a report on what they spent this offseason because, wow.
It feels like limitless money that the Cardinals are spending on this roster this season with what they've been able to put together. But a credit to Pat Kelsey, a credit to that coaching staff, that group, that they were able to do this. They had a great offseason last year. Came up short in the NCAA tournament. Didn't really have the season that I think a lot of people were hoping out of Louisville. They won the games they were supposed to win. Didn't really win games that they weren't supposed to win, in the sense that there weren't a whole lot of upsets. It was just they lost the games they should have lost. They won the games they should have won. They bowed out in the second round. It was about a run-of-the-mill season.
And I am giving them the asterisks of the whole Michael Brown Jr. injury situation. If he was healthy the whole year, I firmly believe that they would not have been a 6 seed. I think it could have been higher. I think they could have won a few more games that maybe they weren't supposed to. But then again, this roster on paper is better than last year's roster, put simply.
You and I both had Xavier at number 2. I think Xavier, we've talked a lot about what Xavier's been able to do. We don't need to go through anything individually. This is an NCAA tournament team that they have put together where they end up getting seeded. Whether they end up making the tournament, look, they got to play the season. But at least, as I said the other day, you can watch this upcoming Xavier season, and wins and losses will absolutely matter, whereas last year it was all about development.
For sure. And you lose 8 of your 9 rotational pieces and get better, significantly better. And that is just a credit to the resources that were poured into the team. And like we said earlier, they landed everybody who they made a priority. This team is not just kind of picking and choosing after your first or second main targets weren't there. Everybody who's on this team, it was intentional from Richard Pitino and the scout that they did. They brought in their guys that they wanted. And I think they're going to reap of those benefits landing these guys with this season.
All right, and then number 3, we both had Cincinnati. Jared Calhoun still looking to add a couple of pieces to this team, but Calhoun going out and filling out his roster with players that can compete at this level. Tylan Riley, somebody that's expected to be able to score. It's expected to be probably this team's best player, a priority recruit for Cincinnati. They land him. I think this is a team that can make the NCAA tournament, but I'm not going to sit here and put an NCAA tournament expectation on them only because the Big 12 will be deep. You look at some of the teams in the Big 12. We talked about the portal class that West Virginia was able to assemble this year. Teams in the Big 12, one of the best conferences, you could argue the best conference in the country. The Big 12 will be a monster again, and because of that, I don't want to sit here and say that, Cincinnati for sure will be a tournament team, but because it expanded to 76, they will have more options in front of them. I had NKU next. You had Dayton next. I really like what Dayton did. It's not taking away from Dayton. This is relative to their team and to their conference. I think NKU won their retention of what they were able to bring back from this past season, bring back a lot of rotational pieces from what they played with this year. And you also go out and you add a lot in the portal that you really needed, got guys that you wanted, ACC transfer and BJ Davis-Ray, which is not nothing. He's a very good player will be, I expect to be at this level. That's my take on NKU. You had Dayton 4th. Your thoughts on the Flyers?
So I want to go back to Cincinnati really quick.
Okay.
You're talking about, I trust Jared Calhoun. At the end of the day, the guy can coach. And in this roster, it felt so intentional. What I kind of classified it, I put it into 3 main groups of these guys that they got. So you look at the first group, you have Colvin, you have Hastings, you have Fleming. What are they? They're these proven power conference players who are able to produce. They can come over to the Big 12 and you expect a pretty similar output because they proved it at the power conference level. The second group of players, I have Tylan Riley, Tyler Tejada, Riley Allensbach, and Travion Carson. Guys who are able to dominate at the mid-major level, who were expecting to be able to come into the Big 12 and maybe not match the production just because of usage, but they're going to be able to pull their weight on a Big 12 team. And then the last group I have, Adlin Elamine, Eric Mahaffey, Elijah Perryman, and David Aweze. You have young guys with potential, guys who showed that they are able to make plays as freshmen at the mid-major level. I think these kind of 3 groupings, I think it was a very intentional build of this roster. I think Calhoun did a good job prioritizing guys in these different groups to kind of complement each other. Now, going to Dayton. Dayton lost 4 of their top 7 scorers. I think Anthony Grant just reloaded this team, and they're on paper better than they were going to be a year ago on paper heading into the season. They bring in a top 80 portal class in the country. You have guys like Jalen Haynes, Travis Perry, Zayd Lowry, who are proven high major players. Granted, Haynes didn't play at the high major level, but he dominated the A-10 at George Mason. So you have guys who showed that they can dominate at this high level. And in the case of Perry and Zayd Lowry, they can come down and increase their output going from the SEC and Big East respectively. I think Dunk Joseph and Grant Randall are really high upside mid-major guys who are able to produce at Quinnipiac and Marshall. And I'm really intrigued by the Tristan Ford ad, a guy from Murray State, if he's going to be able to he redshirted last year at Murray State, but if he's going to be able to hold his own in the rotation. But the best part of this Dayton team to me is the recruiting class. Top 25 recruiting class in the country. 3 guys who are ranked in the top 300. Aiden Durkak and Cody Peck were number 2 and number 3 in all-time ranked recruits that Dayton has ever gotten. Number 1 obviously being Deron Holmes, who ended up being one of the best Dayton players of my lifetime. And then you look at a guy in Julian Washington, who is a 3-star. They brought in dudes. A top 25 recruiting class for Dayton, that's amazing, right? And you look at their retention. I think Amel Latong is going to have another massive jump. If you look at his freshman to sophomore year, his points per game went up about 4 points. He looked more comfortable on both ends of the floor. I expect another jump into his junior season. I think Jayon Simon is a key rotation piece who's coming back. I expect his output to also increase. You look at guys like Malcolm Thomas, Damon Frary, and Jaron McKee, who are also coming back. McKee redshirted. The other two played sparing minutes. I expect them to be able to play a little bit more and play a bigger role. But I think just looking at how this roster came together through the big-time portal additions, the obviously star-studded high school class, and their retention, I think this Dayton team is going to be a top 3 team in the A-10, and I think this group could be the one to get over the hump for Dayton.
All right, moving on. Miami, then Wright State, and then we have Kentucky at the bottom. Thoughts on, we'll start with Miami since we haven't talked about them yet.
Yes, that was really long-winded on Dayton, but
you're all good.
So
we hadn't done a whole lot with. I mean,
well, that's it. We hadn't talked about Dayton at all today.
We really hadn't talked about Dayton at all, so that's fine.
So looking at Miami, they lost 5 of their 9 main rotational pieces, right, from obviously an incredible team. But I think they did a really good job reloading. You look at a guy like Stevie Elam, you look at Rich Rolfe, you look at Preston Copeland. They're all guys who showed that they can produce at the Horizon League and MAC levels. I really, really like Stevie Elam's game, especially as a freshman at Milwaukee. I think he is probably going to be the transfer that I expect the most from in terms of output. But the thing with Miami, and the reason that I had them at number 5 in this list, we have to look at the retention. Evan Ipsaro is going to be back. He's going to be healthy. And you have Luke Skaljak right next to him, who pretty much came in as his replacement in a sense. The both of them on the court together, the scoring ability, the playmaking ability. I'm really excited for what they're able to do. You get Almar Atlason back. I think he's going to be more comfortable. He's going to be asked to take more shots, and I think his volume is going to increase because of that. And then Justin Kirby, a guy who didn't play a minute up until January. He's thrust in. He's going to have a full off season knowing that he's not going to be redshirting. He's going to be a key rotation piece, and I think he's going to have a great year. If you look at kind of what they did in the high school recruiting, I think Anthony Fresh and Alan Horton are guys who can round out this rotation. You have guys like Robbins, LaShawn Stowers, guys like that. I think they're going to be able to also maybe crack this rotation and add to the depth of this Miami team, which I fully expect to be able to bring another MAC title to Oxford.
All right, we had Wright State here checking in. Now, you had Wright State 6, then NKU 7, then Kentucky's. I think Kentucky's a clear-cut last. I had NKU a bit higher. Wright State we haven't talked about yet. Chad Traylor coming in from Charleston is an ad. I liked him at Charleston. I had a chance to watch him a lot this past season down there at Charleston. Makes the transition over to the Horizon League, and I think that'll be a good fit for him. They lost a lot, Wright State did, so they were being asked to replace a ton of scoring. I think they've done it. Oh, for sure. They lost 7 of their 10 main rotation pieces. And when you're a team like Wright State in the Horizon League, you win both the regular season and the Horizon League tournament, and you have guys who were underclassmen, you're obviously going to have them hit the portal. You lose guys to Cal, to Utah State. You just can't compete when you're Wright State. But like you said with Chad Traylor and like we mentioned earlier, Nicola Joppa, they're coming down a level in a sense, and I think their usage is going to go up, and so will their production. I think CJ O'Hara, proven star in the Horizon League with what he was able to do at Green Bay, and I like taking a flyer on a guy in Sam Johnson at the D2 level. So if we look at it from their retention, you lose 1 through 4 in your scoring category, but you bring back 5 through 7 and Dominic Pangonis, Kellen Pickett, as well as Andre Holden. I think they're going to be able to see their production go up. They're going to be, instead of 5, 6, 7, they could easily be 3 of the top 4 in scoring for this Wright State team. I think you also have guys in PJ Douglas and Isaiah Williams who redshirted this past year, who the staff seems to be pretty excited about, see if they can crack the rotation and provide good minutes. They also brought in 3 high school recruits, Noah Lewis, Taj Martin, and Terrence Hayes Jr. You're bringing in a lot of newness, but guys who hopefully
develop. Maybe you could see one or two of them crack the rotation, but you're building for the future, which is something that Wright State is going to have to do if they keep up this success and you keep seeing guys transfer up. But back-to-back Horizon League titles is right there with this group, in my opinion.
All right, and then the last thing, we've talked a ton about Kentucky, so we don't need to run through everything about the Wildcats here. My question to you as we finish up this show, if there are Kentucky fans watching and Malachi Moreno goes to the draft and Milan Momcilovic comes back, we'll say the doomsday scenario for Kentucky is that Moreno leaves for the draft and Momcilovic goes to Louisville. That's the break glass in case of emergency, press the panic button, freak out. That's the worst option for Kentucky. The best option is that Moreno comes back, Momcilovic, they kind of throw the bag at him and he commits to the Wildcats and things turn around a little bit for them. But, I mean, you're looking at it right now, Ben, and this is going to sound crazy. Maybe this is an overreaction. Maybe I need to take a step back. But in the SEC, they could struggle big time, I think. You like this roster better than I do. I think it's an okay roster if it wasn't Kentucky, but this roster should not look like this for Kentucky, and that's been my point all along.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I'm going to take another step back just because, like with NKU at 7, it sounds really bad. Right, I want to give my rationale here so NKU fans don't make it sound like I'm a hater. I'm not.
Hating the Norse. Come on, Ben.
You got to understand, they lost each of their top 5 scorers and 6 of their 8 main rotational players to graduation, right? It's not like they transfer, they just graduated. And you lose that experience of O'Day. You lose the experience of Dozier, Cale Robinson, LJ Wells. That, to me, and you look at their retention, is just why I have them lower, just because the guys that you have coming back, Ethan Elliott is proven as their point guard, but other than that, it's kind of unproven. And even with Ethan Elliott, he's going to have to take a jump.
He's got to score more.
Exactly.
He's got to score more.
Exactly. But obviously, we talked about their kind of portal class heavily, but the reason that I have them at 7 is losing each of your top 5 scorers.
Because you're a hater.
They're going to be top 3 in the league. Like, I'm not hating. Like, maybe I am. I don't know.
No, you're not hating. We love the Norse. You're not hating. I'm just giving you a hard time.
Anyway, sorry.
Anything else on the
No,
Norse?
well, that was. I just wanted to say my piece about why they were at 7, and I hope they shock me. I really do. But the reason why they were there, you could say with portal class they could be higher because I love the gets that they had, but it wasn't necessarily like adding to a ton retention-wise. It was more replacing all of the guys that they lost. Like I said, Acker and Davis Ray, they can be 2 of the best guards in the conference. Like, I could easily end up being wrong about them at 7.
Sure.
Just wanted to say my piece there.
We'll see. Ben, anything else before we wrap up?
Well, I'm going back to the Kentucky thing. I'm like very long-winded today. I don't know.
Well, you're okay. I just didn't know if you had exhausted what you wanted to say about Kentucky or not, because it looked like you hit a lot of the bullet points. But go ahead.
Well, I mean, so with me, I put in all caps on our notes. So first of all, they're losing their top 5 scorers, which you kind of expect that year to year. Just for like, you obviously knew they were going to lose Owe. You knew they were going to lose Aberdeen. Not in the fashion. I still don't know if he's going to be able to play or not. If he is, wow. If he's like, he was going to be gone regardless. But the amount that they lost to the portal, not saying that they're all the worst losses in the world, but the fact of the matter is you're not retaining a ton. All that they have coming back right now is Cam Williams, who in the minutes that he played, he showed a lot of promise, but with the foot injury, he just didn't play a ton, right? But my big thing with them and the reason why they're at 8, because they have the number 12 portal class in the country, but it's the fact that there's too many swings and misses. It felt like a lot of the guys that they're getting aren't necessarily high priority guys. Like when Mark Pope was on the plane tweeting to BBN, I don't think he expected to be landing guys like Justin McBride and Jerome Morton. Yeah. And then looking at it recruiting wise, like Usman Njai, Mason Williams, great gets, right? but you put all your eggs in the Tyron Stokes basket and you kind of shot yourself in the foot there. Same with the whole Donnie Freeman thing. Sebastian Rancic is going to be a great player for Florida State this year, and that's a guy that Kentucky had. And you could look at any of the other kind of recruits in the 2026 class who Kentucky maybe could have landed. Yeah. They didn't get because they put all their eggs in the Tyron Stokes basket. So it's like too many swings and misses for me for Kentucky. But with guys, I think Zoom Diallo and Alex Wilkins is going to be a better pairing than a lot of people are acting like they will be. I think Mark Pope's excited about that pairing according to his Q&A videos. But to me, there's something still missing. But thankfully for them, like we said, with Milan still being available, perhaps, that's got to be a guy that they go try. If a guy like Tunde Yesufu decides to come back to school, UCLA was linked to him from the moment that he entered the portal, but also declared for the draft. You have the resources. Go try and make a splash that way. A guy like Ryan Hampton, a 5-star recruit in 2027, see if you can go get him to reclass. There's still time to rectify this. And like you said, I am a bigger fan of this roster than most people are, just because, I don't know, I think the evaluation was there. I just don't necessarily think that there's the star power that people see for Kentucky to think that this team can be any good. But they are going to have to go get that guy. And if they don't, and if Malachi Moreno leaves, then they could be in trouble.
Look, you talk about being long-winded, Ben. I had no problem with you being long-winded on this show. That's why I planned this show the way that I did, to give you the freedom to, as I always say, pull the string and just let you go, because I wasn't sure. We don't know. You're going away for this summer. Might not hear from you until August or September. People will hear from me plenty. We're going to be doing weekly shows here on the Rebound Rundown from now throughout the rest of the offseason. Monday is the day that we've generally been recording or been releasing shows. Might go out more on Wednesday here as we get more into the summer, but we'll see. You're going to have a show every week throughout the summer and into the fall, but you're not going to hear from Ben for a little while. So I figured, you know what? Why not? Give you the opportunity to get all your takes off your chest. Is there any other take that you have that is sitting down there deep in the trenches of your heart and your brain that you want to talk about right now before you're off the show for a little bit?
So I think I'm going to save there are some underrated portal classes that I like. I'm going to save those once we get into kind of August, September.
We need content later, Ben.
Dude, no,
I need to rewire your brain to the content brain is what I need to do.
No, I don't think people really want to hear about how I love the Oklahoma State and Oregon classes right now. I think that would be a better time to talk about those classes when we're giving previews of the Big 12 and the Big 10 so people can hear more about their local teams, but also be like, I love what Dana Altman did with Jasper Johnson, Taylor Bowen, etc., right? Like...
Correct, Ben. Correct.
There will be a time and a place for you to be able to hear all that I think about the rest of the country in due time.
We will do that later here on the Rebound Rundown. But I want to thank you, Ben, first of all, for all of your help this season, everything that you were able to do with growing the social media following of the team. And it was really fun being able to do these shows with you. And we'll have plenty more of those in the fall. Enjoy your summer, Ben. We'll talk to you again when you're around. Maybe, who knows? Maybe you make a trip to Cincinnati and we hear from you at some point in the next couple of months. We'll see. But that's Ben Eckstein. I'm Paul Fritschner. Make sure that you subscribe to this show wherever you're listening to this right now. We did hear your feedback on the audio, so hopefully the audio sounds a little bit more balanced, and that this was more palatable on the listen than the last couple of shows have been.
Paul's got a loud voice. I've got a soft voice.
Well, we're in this new studio. We're trying to figure out how the sound balances in the new studio and everything down here in downtown Cincinnati. But we spent the last couple of days here in the studio trying to figure out how to rebalance the whole sound system. So hopefully, you all liked what you heard today. If you did, make sure you subscribe wherever you're listening to this. Leave a rating and a review if you're listening on Apple or Spotify. Subscribe on YouTube. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And we'll talk to you next week on the Rebound Rundown.